Professor Deaton, you have devoted much of your life work, as far as I understand it, to the question of human well-being, broadly speaking.
Right.
And you've done so from the field of economics. If you could, how would you describe the sort of main central idea that has animated and fueled your work for all these years?
I'm not sure there is one. My wife and co-author Ann Case likes to say I'm very fickle. I don't stick to one idea for very long. And I think that's really true. I mean, you know, as an economist, obviously I started worrying about how much income people had or how much they got to consume. But over the years, I've tried to broaden these ideas towards other aspects of well-being, particularly health, but not just health. Things like education, you know, where you live, what sort of society you live in. There's lots of things that are much, well, I'm not going to say much more important, but important too.
Would it be fair to say, were there ideas early in your career that you felt were bigger contributions to human well-being that you later in life have downgraded, if you will, because of either new insights, new analytics, new technologies? And what would be examples of that?
Perhaps. I'm not sure. I mean, one of the really nice things that your compatriots in Sweden did for me was to make sense of my life in a way that I never really made sense of it before. And so I thought I would never get that prize because my work is very fragmented, or it seemed to me it's about a lot of different things. And I am sort of impatient to move on to the next thing. And I do get very interested in particular things at particular times. But it's true that it all has to do with human well-being. And it's certainly true that when I started out, I worked on much narrower things like saving for the future. You know, it's a very important topic. And it's an important topic for the economy as well as for individuals. And, you know, I was also, like most young people, I was much more entranced with technical fireworks than I am now, where I've become much more suspicious of them. But, you know, I still think savings and consumption is very important, but I think health is much more central than I had when I started. I think the way society works is incredibly important too.
Sure. And what would you say from the outside, and you must have met this in much of your work, but what would you say in general are the greatest misconceptions, if there aren't any, because I've met some, outside economics, that sort of institutions outside the field of economics hold about well-being in economics?
Well, I think economists have a somewhat justified reputation for only being concerned with money. And, you know, my work, especially over the last couple of decades, has been concerned with, you know, trying to broaden beyond that. And, you know, some of that is things like economists, like philosophers, have become much more interested in happiness in recent years, which is something that we used to think was sort of a joke. I don't think it's a joke anymore. Well, only a joke, and obviously happiness is not a joke, but of studying happiness or asking people how their lives are going.
Maybe that's a good segue into yours and Anne's latest book, The Death of Despair.
You know, originally it was just accidental. We were looking at something very different and discovered that people who should have been living longer every year were in fact living shorter every year. And then as we've worked on that over the years and in the book and since, there's really this terrible thing going on that didn't used to go on at all, which is that, you know, since 2010 in particular, people who have a 4-year college degree, their lives are getting longer and longer. People without a 4-year college degree, their lives are getting shorter and shorter. And so it's not just a question of some people doing better while the other people are doing okay. It's actually, they're going off in different directions. One, their lives are getting better and longer and richer. And the other, whose lives are getting shorter, they're experiencing a lot more pain. Their marriages are not working as well as they did before. And, you know, it's you know, if you go back in American history, it's sort of the syndromes that in the days of Daniel Patrick Moynihan were associated with African American family life have now come to white family life, and indeed to a lot of less educated African Americans too. So we've got a really, really bad thing going on here. And the people without a college degree are not just a few people who didn't manage to go to college, it's 2/3 of the adult population. So we have a rising suicide rate over the past 20 odd years, which is the rest of the world suicide rates are falling, even in places like China or Lithuania, the ex-former Soviet Union countries. And we're going in the opposite direction. And, I can't imagine a more vivid indicator of despair than rising suicide rates for both men and women. And once again, they're happening really only among less educated Americans.
What I found to be the most pressing issue in the book is the state of our healthcare system and what it has done to also economics and economic well-being.
All of these jobs that used to be starting level jobs, in good places, they're not there anymore. And a lot of this is because of this extraordinary cost of healthcare. And I don't know why economists have not written about this more. There's a huge literature on what the minimum wage does to wages and employment. But this is like, you're talking about comparable numbers. I mean, if you have to pay $20,000 a year for a health premium, or someone has to pay that, so it either has to come out of wages or it comes out of profit. $20,000 a year for a 2,000-hour year is $10 an hour.
This is a huge issue, and you ought to be on both political sides of the spectrum, be very in favor of fixing it, but I don't see it. So why is this so hard? Why is this just, what's your take?
One of my colleagues likes to say the American government is a hospital with an army. That's how we sort of spend our money. Well, this is one of the things where cui bono is a good way to go. Who's benefiting from this? Well, there's a very large number of people who are benefiting from this. The pharma companies are getting very rich on this. The hospitals are the biggest share of healthcare spending. A lot of them are monopolistic. They're just out of control. And they have incredibly powerful allies in Congress. There's another bit to it that's important. We were with Anne's family in upstate New York this weekend. One of her aunts had died, and we went to the funeral. And, we're all of the same sort of age, in our 60s or 70s. And we're talking about healthcare and ailments and all the rest of it. And ordinary people love the healthcare system. They think it's wonderful. So, this idea that it's sucking the blood out of us is not something that's widely appreciated, which really helps too. And, if people got the bill for their healthcare in their paychecks every month, I think it might be easier to reform it, because most people think their employers are paying for their healthcare. I'm skeptical that the markets can handle healthcare. I don't think that's possible. I think around the edges, it can. I think you can have a market system built on top of a sound state system, like they have in Britain and several European countries. But I think, Ken Arrow, who's one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, wrote a very famous paper in 1968, just explaining why you can't run, the market won't do healthcare. Having your knees replaced is not like buying a can of tuna or a hamburger or something. There's no repetition, there's no information. Competition doesn't make it work. Competition makes it worse. And so I think you can't do healthcare without very substantial state involvement. And I'm not sympathetic to the people on the right who are arguing that, if only we posted prices and there was more competition. I'm all for posting prices and for more competition, but I don't think it's going to solve the basic problems.
So if you were king for a day, you look over your career, you look at, if there was one thing you could change to improve the well-being of humanity, what would it be?
Well, in the US, it would be to have a public healthcare system. And I think that would do an enormous amount for many people, and not for the things that most people think. Most people think, well, public healthcare system is just so that poor people can get insurance. It's not so that poor people, well, it is that poor people, but the main point is to stop us all having to pay the price of this incredibly inefficient system we have now, and that would revivify the world. I would also more broadly like to see something we talked about, and I think we agree about, which is a sort of respect for the good things that capitalism can do, and have that better appreciated, because then you can build the understanding to repair the bits of it that are not working so well, and we need it. And the danger, the biggest danger right now, is that people get so angry they'll pull it down.
And what makes you optimistic about the future?
What makes me optimistic about the future is, you mentioned Pinker's book. My book, The Great Escape, is sort of not dissimilar from that. You know, we want our lives to be better. We want our kids, our grandkids to do better than we did. And, you know, we have the Enlightenment, which taught us how to think and how to say, okay, let's use reason to make things better. And I think that's one of the most powerful forces in the world. And I think even with things like climate change, in the end, we'll find a way. We might get very badly burnt along the way, but that power of reason is our hope. You know, that's how we can make the world a better place.
Sure, amen to that. Well, Professor Deaton, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to talk to you today, and on behalf of TEDxChicago and the future well-being of humanity. Thank you for all your significant contributions to the field, and I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you very much. You too. And I join you in wishing for all the best for the future of humanity.